Welcome to the second video for ARC 172 LAID drawing. In the last video we constructed a 3" by 3" by 3" 45-degree axonometric cube. The next step is to transfer our figure ground diagrams to the bottom and the back side. I typically recommend that you use the back rear side to the right. It would also work to put it on the left rear side as well, especially if you're left-handed potentially, but the reason I recommend that is so that the geometries that we will eventually construct within the cube are not behind your data. So each of you will end up with two diagrams that should look something like this. These are Brandon's. Thank you for letting me use these, Brandon. So he's got two diagrams here. One is more active, one is maybe a little less active. That's fine. In fact, it's probably good to have some that have some difference from one another. So I mentioned in class that you should probably make a crop window out of trace to just see kind of where you might want to crop this thing. So I think what I discussed with Brandon is, again, I think the most interesting, or the ones that are going to work, are going to have the most difference. So I wouldn't necessarily come like right here in the middle, where you have a lot of activity here. It might be good to pick up some of that detail, but maybe we get a little calmness as well. So I think I'll pick a place like this, and then you can take, in your crop window, I will take my non-photo and just mark corners so I know where to draw those approximately. And with a drawing like this that has maybe less detail, it might actually behoove you to reduce the size of this a little bit. But for today's demonstration, I think I'll just pick a space that has some difference. But something like this, you might actually want to reduce this maybe by 65 or 75 at 75%. But we'll just pick an area here. Okay, so once you have your basic area, you will take this and tape it down. And I think my director of photography made me move all of my drafting dots out of frame. So pause that for a second. Okay, we're back. We found some drafting dots. I'm going to verify the 3" crop, which that looks like that's just about right. And then what we want to do is basically within that area, we're going to redraw the frame boundaries. I will figure out what 3" is here. That's actually 3 by 2. And then within the frame boundaries, we will do the same thing we did with the plan, which is basically pull every corner through. All right, we're still gridding out our all right, we'll do that in the other direction. Okay, so I've pulled all the geometry to the edges. We'll stop the video and come back after we've done that with the other one as well. So my director of photography has zoomed in on the other grid gridding of the figure ground drawing. So this is the more active one. You see that basically for every corner in the drawing, just like you did with the plan, you draw a vertical and a horizontal line through here. You don't necessarily see on the video that I've drawn that across here, but the idea is to get all the data out to the edges. So now that we have our gridded copies of our figure ground drawings, we are going to transfer the information to the cube. I believe that this was on the bottom, so you can cut these. I cut the view window out of the trace with a X-Acto on my cutting mat, but I'm going to just do this the fast way. Apologies to the rest of the diagram. So then I think I'll do that with this too, to show you guys kind of how this, how to place your data, or some considerations you should make. So if this is the data that's going on the bottom of the cube, this is the data that's going on the back. Again, it doesn't totally matter exactly how the data ends up on the cube, but just if you had like a lot of density of figure, you might want to put that kind of towards the rear. In the end, it doesn't matter too much because the data can become either solid or void. It could be an adder or a subtractor. So it doesn't matter entirely, but I always like to try to look at this to see what are the possibilities for data interacting. So, for instance, anything, this rectangle here on the back is only going to interact with things on the bottom in that zone here. So just keep that in mind as you place it. But I think this would work fine. So the way that you transfer the data, you can basically use the gridded version that I just showed you as a direct kind of measuring device. So you can take all of these grid lines that we marked here and transfer them directly to the cube. Let's see, I think I missed one there. And just try to be as accurate as possible. It's not like we're building a nuclear reactor or anything, but you just want to try to keep it as faithful to your diagrams as you can. So there I've transferred all of these marks along this edge to here. Because we pulled the lines through, you could just as easily have done this and get the same lines. And then in this direction, you want to pull or transfer the marks. Again, you could do it like this or like this. They should be the same because we pull it all the way through. Just be sure that you pick up those grid lines that are actually in the field of the figure, especially in a nice darkly pochade one like Brandon's here, but I think I've gotten all that. Okay, so then, and again, I'm using non-print purple here. You will probably be using your 6H. Hopefully this shows up a little bit better on the video. But it might look a little darker than your construction lines. tape corners there. Just make sure you're well seated against your parallel ruler. Okay, other direction. A lot of lines. Okay, so I have the information gridded, and it should match what I had before. It looks like it does. So then the, oops, we got to pull one of these across. And then basically you're going to go through and pick up and enhance, and I'll do this with my my LAIAD, just so you can see it a little bit better. But you're going to enhance all the figures. So this figure here, for example, is in the first row and second column, or vice versa, however you want to take that. So then I'm just going to come in and darken that in a little bit. And I do typically, it might not be as efficient, but I do typically take these and do them kind of one by one. So then that, oops. This next figure, this kind of T-shape, that shares a corner, and then there's skips one here and goes to here, and you've got this. So that figure looks like this. And you don't really want to do this too dark. I'm probably doing it a little bit darker than you should so that you can see it, but you don't want to have it so that it's basically going to read in front of the things that you're putting on top of it. So I'm going to pause the video and finish this, and I'll show you what the final result looks like. All right, so we have transferred the plan diagram to the bottom of the cube. Again, probably darker than you will do it. So the grid that we put on there, we went through and we enhanced the edges. So basically you can see these figures are mirrored in this bottom one. For what we're doing on the back, and let's see, how do we want those to interact? I think we had said like this. So don't get confused by the fact that this turns into a parallelogram. The transferring of the data is the same. And again, it doesn't matter whether you do it as long as you keep the edges consistent. So the vertical edges here, the horizontal edges here. So let's go ahead and transfer those edges. A little bit off there, but, and same in this direction. And you can see that because I tore them against my scale, the edges are a little rough. So since you guys are going to be more careful than I am, your edges should be fine. So the vertical edges will stay vertical, right? So this is still going to run vertical, parallel to the edges of that face. And the horizontal edges are going to stay parallel to what our horizontal edges, but in this depiction, in the fictive space of the three-dimensional axonometric cube, they're going to be at this 45-degree angle, but they all still stay parallel. They're all at true dimensions. So that is what the rear grid should look like, all still parallel within this parallelogram. So I will again pause the video and enhance this and get back to you in a sec. Okay, we have enhanced the figures on the back rear side, in this case the right rear side of the axonometric cube. So from the grid you can see basically all of these rectangles become these parallelograms, but essentially all the same dimensions, just basically transferred to the parallelogram that represents the back right side of the cube. So that is how you set up or transfer your data to the 3-inch cube. So that's basically it for this video. In the next video, I'll show you how you start to extrude this information, and we'll start the first exercises, which will be pulling up the data as both additive and subtractive from the bottom. Same thing from the back. We're just going to start it simple, and we'll build on that. Thanks very much.